Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast where entrepreneurs, founders, and ambitious professionals come to learn from those who have walked the path, navigating challenges and achieving success. Whether it's thriving in business, pivoting, scaling for growth, fundraising, or finding work-life balance, dealing with loneliness, adversity, or overcoming personal struggles. Our guests share the insights and strategies that have empowered them to level up. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Stephen Howard. Stephen is an expert in leadership and author of 22 books on leadership and business growth. Stephen has spent decades pioneering the people-centric leadership approach through his work with global teams. In this episode, we'll explore his human-centered leadership philosophy, how cross-culture experiences shape leaders, and the importance of resilience, communication, and adaptability in driving business growth. Whether you're leading a startup, a large corporation, or anywhere in between, this conversation will be packed with actionable insights for your leadership journey. Hi, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm excellent, Sonia. How you doing?
I'm good. It's Monday. I can't complain. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to get into this episode and pick your brain and learn from you from all the things that you've done in your career, where you've been and where you're at, and hopefully bring something to our audience that they will be able to take away for their own startups and leadership and things like that.
Great. Well, I hope I can contribute.
Perfect. So I'm going to start with my first question. You've been a pioneer in the Humany Leadership approach, focusing on people-centric leadership. Can you share how this approach helps leaders and teams, especially in challenging times?
Wow, that's a great question and multifaceted, but let me see if I can
I'm
take that.
starting off high.
Yeah, a little bit at a time here. We got the main course going,
I
obviously,
don't
no
mess around,
appetizers.
okay?
Um, yeah, I have a belief that coming out of the pandemic, people's attitudes towards what work is in their life, the place in life has changed dramatically. And that doesn't matter whether they're working for a small startup or whether they're working for a large multinational organization. And so people's attitudes about work has changed. And therefore, I think people's attitudes and mindsets about leadership needs to change. And that's where the phrase people-centric comes in. Understanding that, as I always say to the people I'm coaching or leading is that, look, we don't lead human resources. We don't lead assets. We don't lead workers. We lead human beings. And if you can, excuse me, change your mindset to get your head around the fact that we are leading human beings. And that's where we need to kick off in leadership. And then as we talk today, I'll give you a couple of my favorite phrases that talks about why people leadership is so important in today's world.
Well, let's get right into it. Can you explain a little more about that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Sonia. The basic premise of Humany, as you see on the title there, and that's the name of my latest book, is Humany. It's a word I created. It's not in the dictionary. It combines human, humanity, and harmony to put an emphasis on being people-centric and creating workplaces of well-being. But the basic premise is very simple.
Mm.
No one wakes up in the morning and wants to be managed. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to be managed by my boss. And certainly no one says, I can't wait to be micromanaged by my boss. And that's the big difference today. I mean, look, when I was a leader and had people reporting me in the early 2000s, yeah, that's the way we were. We managed people. Well, managing people is a 1980s construct, and it doesn't apply to today's workforce. And so we have to change our mindsets. And it's very simple. We manage things, policies, procedures, projects, processes, but we lead people. And if we can make that mindset change, if your founders and entrepreneurs and leaders of organization can make that mindset change, and it's hard when it's your own business, but
Mhm.
make that mindset change, you're going to create a sustainable business going forward.
So I lead teams and people, and like when I was going through the very early startup stages, you know, leaders who go through the process of building a business and having a baby, it's essentially what it is. I think their leadership style is different because it's their baby. They're sort
Yes.
of like, I don't want anybody to mess this up, and they want full control. How do you go from that phase of this is my baby, I want full control, micromanaging everybody, to shifting and saying, oh, my company has now grown. I need to have a better, diverse team and no stress. And, I need to delegate. How do you change your leadership style from that to this? It's almost like a brain pivot.
It is. Well, I wish I had pretend this is Harry Potter's magic wand to give you, but I don't. But the word pivot, it's a good word. It's a mindset change. It's the way you walk into the office, think about how you want to lead people, and part of that, what you just described, when you get to that point in building your business, you have to start trusting people, and you have to realize that you're not going to always have all the answers. So part of this, part of a humany approach to leadership is also being a little bit humble and saying, you know what, I may not have all the answers. I may have, I may create a great idea, great product, and I can get that product out the door. I can figure out how we're going to manufacture it. But am I good at branding? Am I good at hiring the right sales team, the right distribution strategy? Maybe that's not in my wheelhouse. And now that's where I need to, and that's how you build your business. You bring in people who have expertise in some of the functional areas that you don't. And yes, you're going to have to trust them. At the end of the day, yes, you're going to make decisions, no doubt about it. But sometimes, I mean, some of the greatest teams I've led, I've sat back and said, if that's what you think we should do, I agree. Let's go do it that way.
So, what happens if in my startup journey, I somehow realize, hey, I'm not the best leader in the world, or my team is sort of showing me, indirectly, I don't like working with you, or you all of a sudden notice that you have a really high turnaround rate where people are just leaving. That sort of indicates that leadership is not that great. How can a leader learn? Are there tools? How can you learn how to be a better leader? Or do you at some point say, you know what, maybe leadership is not my thing. And like you said, I'm going to hire somebody to take care of the leadership. But if you're building a business or you run a business, you're automatically a leader. So how can you build those skills?
Open mindset, that learning mindset that look, I can learn this stuff. It's not rocket science. Look, leadership is complicated, but it doesn't need to be complex. You can learn these skills. I mean, and there's a set of skills. And for instance, I'll just give you one example. We always talk about leaders are great communicators. Well, yeah, some leaders, yeah, are great orators. The Winston Churchills, the John Kennedys, the Barack Obamas, the Ronald Reagans. But you know what the most important skills of being a communicator as a leader? There's two of them. It's listening and asking good questions. Now, that's not hard to learn, but it takes the mindset that I'm going to pause and I'm going to ask some really good questions. And then I'm going to ask some follow up questions. I'm going to listen to people. And then, sometimes I have to let, their decisions go. And sometimes I'll make my own. But, it's kind of like the other analogy I'll give you, Sonia, would be like if you're running your own business, one of the first things you probably hired was a lawyer. Well, are you going to tell the lawyer what you want to do from a legal expertise, or are you going to rely on the lawyer for their, you hiring this person as an outsider? You hire your accountant often. Sometimes, obviously, you'll have your chief financial officer internally, but you'll hire tax experts, you'll hire consultants, you'll hire particularly legal expertise because very few entrepreneurs or founders are going to have that in their wheelhouse. So you're going to rely on that. Do the same thing on the people that you hire and rely on their expertise.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good point. Okay, so with your extensive experience across the US, Singapore, Australia, and now splitting your time between Southern California and Mexico City, how do you believe cross-cultural experiences shape leadership style and adaptability?
Oh, greatly. I mean, one of the reasons I often get hired by organizations in the US is because their line managers have never worked with people outside the United States. Particularly I do a lot of work in the oil and gas industry in Texas, for instance, in Louisiana. And, a lot of these folks have never dealt with people outside the United States. And suddenly they're managing teams in Brazil and Czechoslovakia, Poland, India, naturally, particularly in the IT industry. And so a lot of it is just saying, look, you have to understand that as human beings, we bring our culture into the workplace. Now, the Indian culture is different than the United States culture. And so here are some things that you need to understand. And it doesn't mean you have to necessarily do it the Indian way, but if you want to communicate with your team in India, you have to understand the way they approach communications and the way you approach it and find that happy medium. And sometimes you need to dictate the flow as the leader, but sometimes you need to kind of slow down the wheel. One quick instance is that in India, they'll spend the first 15, 20 minutes of a meeting just talking about anything, relationship building. And Americans, particularly North Americans, but particularly in the United States, hey, let's get down to business.
Right
let's brass tacks. And that, exactly. And so you can imagine how that's not going to work with an Indian workforce. Now, at times you might need to also say and be open about it. Guys, look, I know normally blah, 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 but this is urgent. We got a fire going on. We need to get right to the point, to use your phrase. And next meeting, we can build a relationship. And the Indians, that same thing. They have to understand that if they're working with the Americans, that they can't just do it the Indian way. So it's a critical aspect of leadership cross-culturally.
I love how you put that because a couple years ago, like many years ago, and still, I started working with a development team in Eastern Europe. And I remember like every time there was something came up or there was a problem or we wanted to have a discussion, every time we went to them, it was always like they had their back up against the wall and they were defensive and they would go into this defensive mode. And it took me like years to figure out like what's going on with these guys? Like, why is it every time I ask them a question, I feel like I'm shooting them or something? And it took me a couple years to figure out like it's just the way like Canadians, we're very nice, but we can be very blunt and straight to the point. Like we got a busy day. We work way more than they do. That's for sure. The Eastern Europeans have like a lot of time off. But just the way we were approached it was like, hey, we have a problem. We need to deal with it. And it was like even the way we went about it, right? And they just felt like we were being hostile. And instead of having a conversation where we were trying to solve problems, they were just being defensive. Well, we did this because you said this and you did that and you told us to do this. And like we got nowhere and it was super frustrating. And that's why I asked you the question, because I think like more and more, especially with COVID and shutdowns and people working from home, teams are working with cross-functional teams in different countries. So I think it's really important to understand cultures and how to work with those teams in order to make them efficient. You mentioned India, and I work with clients who worked with people in India, and they're just like, never again.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a shame because there's a lot of intel. I mean, India has 1 billion people to it, so there's obviously a lot of smart people over there and a lot of hard workers.
Sure.
But you just have to slow down and understand that. And there's other cultures in Southeast Asia where they put everything in context. So you'll say, "Hey, okay, we had this manufacturing problem. What do you think went wrong?" And they'll go back 15 years and tell you the history of how the factory was built and what happened and why and the water supply and the electricity supply. But that's to them is context, whereas us North Americans, context is like, we got a problem. What's the issue?
Let's get to the point. I'd be like, hey man, I gotta go for lunch. Like, are we gonna end this today?
Exactly. So yeah, so it's just understanding, but again, that's a skill that can be taught. You just have to become aware of it. And I'm not saying you have to fold, to the other side, but you have to adapt. When I go to Japan, let me tell you something. I got a coat and tie on, and I'm very formal and stiff. And see, yes, sir. And then, and here in Mexico, I can have a short sleeve on and say, "See, amigo, what's going on?" Let's talk about it. In fact, talk about lunch. Let's talk about it over lunch. So
Yeah.
cultures are different.
I like how you put it that, they you said India, they start with like first couple minutes, it's just like getting to know each other, conversation. I feel like we should do that in all our meetings, at least for like 2 minutes. Just, hey, how was your weekend? Grab a coffee. You know what I mean? Just take that time. I feel like it would turn the tone of the meetings. So
I
I
think Coming out of COVID, I think that's happening. One of the things I coach people during COVID was when you start those meetings when everyone was working remote was to say, "Hi Sonia, how's your day going? How was your weekend?" And don't just let them say fine. I mean, I was training people dig deeper. What's going on? How's your internet going? The kids are being schooled from home. How's that work? Spend those 3 or 4 minutes, understand what's happening in their life because that's going to impact their productivity. Now we're out of COVID mostly, I guess, but still people have those other issues. And going back to one of your earlier questions, I think about people-centric leadership. I think one of the mindset changes, and fortunately, I'm seeing it more and more, partly because I'm talking about it maybe, but leaders need to understand that people have responsibilities outside work. We used to always talk about your work-life balance, and yeah, that's fine as long as you get your work job done. You can do something on the weekend for fun. And we always thought about that balance is all about fun.
Yeah.
It's not. Now it's about responsibilities. We have to understand people have responsibility, caring for aged parents, maybe looking after, maybe I volunteer to coach a girls volleyball team. Well, that's not fun. That's a responsibility to me. And if my boss understands that and helps me and we work things out, I can still perform my responsibilities at work. But if I need to take off, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 o'clock to go coach the team, understand that that's a responsibility. And the more the organization can help me fulfill those responsibilities, guess what? The more loyal I'll be. I'll come in with a better attitude. I'll be more productive. I won't have this on my head. Oh my gosh, I got to find somebody to coach the team tonight because I got to work late.
Yeah.
Because that's a responsibility. So that's a silver lining. And I think that's part about what people-centric leadership is all about.
Okay. So you've authored 22 books on leadership, business growth. From your perspective, I mean, first of all, that's a lot of writing. But from your perspective, what are the key tenets of leadership that drive sustainable business growth and resilience?
Well, the resilience is probably one of the key things. I mean, resilient people build resilient companies, and so being resilient leaders can build resilient people within that. I think it's a lot of it has to do with communication is I think one of the most important things. I think also it's again leading people. For instance, my observation, and I've done so much of this over the last 25, 30 years, is most feedback in the workplace is ineffective. But there is a way, there is a methodology for giving effective feedback that does get behavior change or gets results. But people have to be taught that. Listening, again, is part of it. And obviously all the things about of having a good product, hiring the right people, motivating the right people. And again, that's one of the other things is that, look, I can motivate myself, but if I had to motivate you, Sonia, you might not be motivated by the same things I'm motivated by. And I have to understand that leader. If I got 12 people reporting to me, there's probably 12 different ways I need to motivate people. I can't just go in with one way and try and motivate everyone the same way, particularly in today's world when we have 5 generations in the workforce. So the way you motivate a baby boomer is going to be very different from the way you motivate a Gen Z or a Gen X or anybody else. So again, leaders have to understand that we're leading people. We can't just put them all in a group and, I've got a team of 12 and I'm going to lead them all the same way. It doesn't work anymore.
But here's the thing. So I'm gonna give you a different perspective. I get all that. And yes, we need to be better leaders and learn. But what happens when you're just exhausted and you have all these responsibilities and you just gotta you get to a point sometimes where you're like, you know what? I've motivated my team. I've put my own mental health and my own priorities aside to try and be a people pleaser or try and make everybody else happy. At what point do you give up, a little bit of yourself and your beliefs to please everybody else? Sometimes I find myself in that place where I'm like, man, can I just be myself for once? I have to be careful what I say, how I act, what I do, because there's always somebody that's going to take it a different way, always.
Yeah,
So
right.
sometimes I get to a point where I'm like, no matter what I do, I can't please everybody. So sometimes I feel like I'm just going to give up and forget it if people don't like me. What advice do you have for leaders when they get to that point in their head?
Try not to give up. It's not about people pleasing either. It's about
It
understanding
feels
that,
like that.
yeah, it's not about people pleasing, I think that, and it is about delivering results. I mean, but it's a different way of getting those results and getting those sustainable results. Um, Look, I've um I've often talked to people, particularly depends on how big your team is, and everything, but very often you'll have 5 or 6% of your employees who just simply are only there for the job. They
Mm,
just want, and they don't care about the stock price. They don't care about, market share. They don't care about innovation. They're just here to do a job.
that's
But
true.
the question I ask leaders is, do you want to spend your time worrying about that 6%? Or do you want to focus on the 94% and keep motivating them and making sure you're not losing them? Don't let them go out. And quite honestly, that 6%, sometimes, again, it depends on the size of your department or unit. That's comforting because they're reliable. They will get the day-to-day stuff done. And the interesting thing is that people like, I presume you, certainly people like me, I don't get motivated by the mundane, the routine stuff. I want to be in the brainstorming session. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to have on my team those 6 or 7% because they can take care of all the day-to-day stuff, which would only demotivate me if you delegated it to me. Instead of delegating to me, hey, let's get in a room and let's brainstorm about this brand, or let's brainstorm about how to improve the product, or let's brainstorm about how to find a new customer base for the product or service that we have.
I like that. The 6%, they're gonna get the job done because that's their mindset is just they're here to do this.
Yeah. And Sonia, that's part of what I mean by the mindset change. Stop trying to lead I'm sorry, not to you, but to
Yeah.
your audience. Stop trying to lead everybody the same way because everyone's not motivated the same way. So, yeah, it does take time. And the other thing is, if I can, is taking what you said about, when as a leader you're getting burnt out. You didn't use that phrase, but you know what a good leader now should do is when you've reached that point where you just want to give up and you're burnt out, is be a good example and tell your team, you know what, guys, I'm taking Friday afternoon off. Unless the building's burning down, don't my brain's on fire. I need a day off. And that's nice because it shows a little bit of vulnerability, a little bit of humility, a little bit of transparency, because mental wellness in the workplace is a huge issue. And so it opens up that other people can come to the leader and say, hey, I really need a couple hours. I'm just exhausted. And the funny thing is, pre-COVID, and hopefully we're seeing it less and less, is when people would come into the boss and say, hey, I hurt my back. I was out with my kids last night playing basketball. I just need a few hours to, hey, go ahead and take the afternoon off.
Yeah.
So we'd allow employees to take care of their physical health. But if the employee would come in and say, my brain's fried, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I need a few hours, I just need to decompress.
Mm.
Come on, Stephen, pull up your socks, get in the game. Don't be a wimp. What's wrong with you? Well, we should not do that anymore. We need to treat mental unwellness just like we would treat physical unwellness and give people a break.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a Gen X, so I feel like my generation is getting better at that. But baby boomers and Gen X, we're sort of the generation where mental health wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
It didn't exist. It's like you weren't feeling well, like you said, get up, suck it up. I feel like millennial generation after Gen X, these younger generations have really put an emphasis on mental health and making it a priority, which I think it is great. But sometimes I find myself in that mindset and expressing myself exactly like you just did, where I'm like, suck it up, buttercup. You gotta go. I do that to myself all the time. I was sick the other day with like strep throat. I'm like, I can't afford to be sick. Damn it. I gotta get up and I gotta go.
And look, some of this is idealistic. And look, there are going to be times when you need to say, hey, guys, we have a deadline. We have to, but is it a true deadline or was it an arbitrary deadline? And if what happens if, everyone took a week off or delayed things? One of my previous books I was so proud of because I had given myself a deadline to publish by a certain date. And I was on an airplane reading the final draft.
Mm.
And I just started swearing at myself on the plane. And I thought, this is just so crap. This is so bad. I need to rewrite at least 3 of these chapters. And so I got the hotel room and I sat down, I kind of figured out what I needed to change. I couldn't do it that night, obviously. But I said to myself, or the next morning, I think I woke up and said, I'm delaying the publication by 3 weeks. And I am going to make this right. And I'm proud of the fact that I did, even though I had told people the book was coming out, whatever it was, early October, and it got delayed by 20 or 21 days to late October. I was glad I made that decision because that's what I would call an arbitrary deadline. I mean, there was, no reason I couldn't delay it other than my own ego. And that's what we do in the business world. Sometimes we're afraid to say, you know what, let's just take an extra month or an extra week, whatever. But people are afraid to do that because we push ourselves, but then we burn ourselves out.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point. You've mentored over 10,000 leaders. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, but let me clarify that just slightly for I mentored, coached, or trained because obviously most of those were in workshops and facilitations and things of that nature. Yeah, but I've been doing it for 25, 30 years now. So and I often tell people I've mentored, coached, and trained people from every continent except Antarctica because it's too cold down there. But yeah, I had a lucky life. In my early 20s, I got shipped to Singapore by the company I worked for, the IT company. You probably heard of them, Texas Instruments, one of the first chip companies. They moved me to Singapore after a few years there. I moved to Time Magazine. I ran South Asia for Time Magazine. Then I worked for a year for the national airline of Sri Lanka. And then I went back to Singapore and worked for several years for Citibank as a vice president of marketing. So I had, so I was all over Asia and Middle East and a little bit of Europe at the time. And when I went off on my own, I was just able to leverage that. I stayed in Asia. I lived in Singapore 21 years and I moved to Australia for 12. So, I was in the right place at the right time. I was very lucky, very blessed to have some experiences. I've trained people in Africa, in Canada, in Mexico, and even in places like Fiji. I've done training of people. So yeah, it's added up over the years.
Yeah, I guess so.
To be successful in marketing, you have to have TLC. And that doesn't mean tender loving care. It means think like customers. So I think what I would say in this case, or in any case, when you're working or selling into a particularly large organization, is think like leaders or think like employees. And obviously, everyone knows about benefits and what have you. But the oil and gas industry is traditional, but it is changing, particularly in Texas. I don't know about in Canada, but particularly in Texas, Louisiana, I have seen a lot more emphasis on things of that nature, digital transformation, particularly when it comes to the chemical in the refineries of understanding that, part of it is like anything else. They're also trying to maintain their head counts, their employees, staff levels and stuff. There is a shortage of labor in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
I know. And so again, anything that you can do to help people be more productive and get more with the resources, the human resources that they currently have, I think you've had an opportunity. I'd like to be flippant and say hire a marketing consultant like me, but that's probably not the answer you're looking for.
So like when I do work in oil, gas and mining, I will say that I find that oil and gas is ahead of mining. Mining is slowly
Yes.
getting there, but oil and gas has they've been working on innovation for a long time. But I do find that so we have a solution that allows companies to digitize the way they collect data using paper and pen.
Okay.
For asset management, for inspections, health and safety, and things like that. And I'm shocked that 90% of the companies that I talk to who come to us and looking for something, and I'm like, okay, well, what processes are you using now? What systems? And they're like, yeah, we're using paper and pen.
Yeah, Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, and I'm always like, wow, like what does that mean? Does that mean that they're like still running their companies like very traditional? And I think it's just priorities. But one of the things that I find is that for them to go digital, they have to teach their workforce how to collect this data now using tablets instead of paper and pen. And
Mhm.
adopting to technology can be difficult for the workforce that has been doing this for 30 years and is going to like retire in 5 years. And a lot of them think like, oh, you guys giving me this tablet, you're watching me now and you're timing me, right? So there's this scare of innovation and adapting technology. Do you find that in working with those industries?
I find it, yes, I do. But I'll be honest. I find it across many industries, particularly with the 50 plus, the baby boomers. As you say, it's like I've been doing it this way for so long. Why do I need to change it? I've seen it in the real estate industry. I've seen it in the even in what people might think would be very innovative industries,
Mm,
such as medical instrumentation. But they're very innovative when it comes to creating those kind of tools for doctors and hospitals and things, but they're not too innovative when it comes to how they're doing things. And it's the same thing. I mean, I find it, even in training. I mean, people still want to do the one-off 2-day, 3-day workshop for everybody. And again, you can't lead everyone the same way. You can't teach everyone the same way. One of the things I do with clients today is whenever I do a 1-day or 2-day workshop is we follow it up with 3 to 6 months of monthly coaching sessions. Open, it's like kind of like office hours.
mm.
On a certain day for an hour and a half, everyone can come and talk about what issues are you having with implementing what I taught you. Say the feedback thing, where you're struggling with, what doesn't feel comfortable. Let's walk through it. And I will do those group coaching sessions for 6 months just to keep reinforcing what I explained in a, workshop or even on a webinar. And that we're seeing that really working a lot better with people.
So what advice would you have for, whether it's technology companies that want to change old to older traditional ways of doing things? What advice would you have for them for going into an industry like oil and gas? How can we go into these spaces and be successful, but not look like we're trying to disrupt the way they do things?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, Sonia, is relationship selling. I mean, I do a lot of coaching of relation or what I would call consultative selling, and
Mm,
it's that understand the same thing. I mean, I did a big project the year before for big cloud company, a cloud services company, and same thing. People are like, well, "You want my data in the cloud? What does that mean?" And they're not sure, but I think helping people understand where their pain points are and building a relationship, making a long-term sale. I'd also, the same thing I told the group there is find organizations where the leader, the decision maker, is in their 40s, not in their 60s. And so it might be, let's say I won't name a company, it's a big oil and gas company. Well, they've got people at certain refineries who are going to be in their 40s who are going to be more open to thinking, more innovative, and they'll have another refinery up the road or in another city or someplace, and that person's 60 years old. Well, I wouldn't go try and sell to that second refinery. I'd go focus on that first refinery and get my foot in the door and show that person just what it can do for their refinery and let them become your evangelists within the organization. Let them tell people, hey, this is why we got those results. We invested in this technology, or we invested in the cloud, for instance. And this is why we were able to do so much more, because the cloud is not just storage, it's how you analyze data as well, as you
yeah.
surely know. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, w- the days of having enterprise installed on your computer are dying out. So adaptability is very important for
Yeah.
these, older, I call them older industries that are still sort of traditional, but
Mhm.
very high risk, where if innovation is introduced, it's going to allow them to be more efficient and be able to reduce their costs.
Absolutely. And particularly the oil and gas industry, because data is so critical at the refinery, at the chemical plants, but also in the R&D area. Find areas that in an organization, it's interesting. As a coach of leaders, I always try and knock down silos. as a coach for salespeople, I always tell people, go find where the silos are because there are some independent decision makers in those silos who can make decisions. They have budgets. So it's kind of like, well, what works for what you're trying to sell.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're coming up with our time, but before we go, I wanted to ask you one last question. For our listeners who are inspiring leaders or early in their leadership journey, what advice would you give them on developing the kind of tenacity that leads to long-term success and fulfillment in their careers?
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I do have an answer for you because something I deeply, deeply believe. And it's something I often end my presentations and my workshop is, and it's very simple. Never stop learning because life never stops teaching. And if you can have that growth mindset as a leader, if you can be not afraid to learn, whether you learn from one of your staff or you learn from a colleague or you go to watch a TED talk or go to the YouTube or buy one of my books or anybody else's books, just keep learning because
This podcast.
yeah, listen to a podcast. Absolutely. Listen to many podcasts and reflect on what. And I think that's one of the problems we have in particularly Western society right now. We so focus on teaching people skills and to do things. We don't teach people to reflect very well. So listen to this podcast and reflect on what it means to you. Listen to the other episodes that you produce and reflect on what you hear. I listen to podcasts when I'm walking outside, and I actually carry a little notepad with me, and I will pause and I'll say, oh, that's interesting. Let me just make a note. And then when I finish it, I usually spend like half an hour just reflecting on what I heard in a podcast as I finish my workout. So yeah, so just when you read a book or you read an article or watch a YouTube video, stop and reflect on what it is and what does it mean for you and how can you implement that?
I love that because I mean that's the reason why I started this podcast. I wanted
Mhm.
those that are in their startup journey or looking to level up to be able to learn from the people who have been there and have done it so that they don't have to have as many failures along the road as we have and we went through because they're learning from those who have been there and done it. So I love how you ended that.
And Sonia, I believe in this so much that, like I said, you mentioned the 11,000 people. I've been doing this for 30 years. Every month, I still read 30 to 40 articles on leadership, and I post the best ones, links to the best ones on my website. And every year, I read 7 or 8 books on leadership. Even though I write these things, I still want to see what other people. Sometimes you just say, I forgot about that, or yeah, that's a good point, or what does that mean now with this people-centric philosophy of mine? How do I take that person's idea and weave it into what I'm doing over here with a client or my next book? So I honestly do believe it's very important.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I appreciate you coming on and having this conversation with our audience. It was so lovely to meet you.
Thank you very much. And congratulations on a very successful podcast. Keep doing it. And I'm sure I'll be learning from you in one of these other episodes down the road.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I want to extend a thank you to Stephen for joining us today. His philosophy on people-centric leadership, focusing on leading human beings rather than simply managing workers, offers such a fresh perspective on how to build resilient and successful businesses. From navigating cross-cultural teams to the importance of continuous learning and reflecting. Stephen has provided invaluable advice for leaders at any stage of their journey. And that's a wrap. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of learning, growth, and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and connect with our community on social media. I'd love to hear your feedback, so leave a review and let me know what topics you'd want to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace challenges, adapt with tenacity, and keep pushing forward. Keep growing, keep pivoting, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you more insightful conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.